Good evening, everybody. We are in middle of Siman Hey of the Iggeres HaKodesh. Actually, saying in middle, towards the beginning. We have a long ways to go. And the focus is on the pasuk Ki beka Hashem tzurei lamim. Ki beka Hashem tzurei lamim. As Chazal tell us, that means that Olam Haba was created with the Yud of Hashem's name, and Olam Haza is created with the Hey of Hashem's name. And this quite lengthy siman in the Iggeres HaKodesh is going to be explaining why it is that, what does it mean that Olam Haba emerges from the Yud and Olam Haza emerges from the Hey. And it's a very deep discussion about the dynamics of the way it works L'mayla. So I figure maybe we'll start off with a little hakdama, a little introduction. For those of you who are wondering, how is this relevant to me? What do I care? The Yud, the Hey, the Olam Haza, Olam Haba, Chachma, Bina, Dibur, all this. What's
significance?
Yeah, tomorrow I want to go. I want to daven. I want to learn some Gemara. Give a little tzedakah.
That's it.
Be there for my family. How is this of relevance to us? I'm reminded of a story that I heard several times from Reb Mendel Merazov, the grandfather of the Rav next door.
Yeah.
He said that in his youth there was a Lubavitcher minion in one of the cities where he was. Maybe it was Leningrad, I don't remember for sure which city it was. And the Seder was that on Shabbos between Mincha and Ma'ariv, by the time of Suda Shlishis, so some of you may be aware that Lubavitch is not very into Shal Shudas. We don't, what? Kayidua, yeah. We don't, meaning is most often we don't wash. We're Yitzhak Shal Shudas on Paris or on some Mazonis. And instead by Shal Shudas, we sit and we sing the Gunim, and someone will say a Maimer Chasidus. And that's the way it was also in that minyan, and every single week there was an older Chassid, a distinguished older Chassid, his name was Rabbi Yisrael Nevler, and he would Chazer Maimer Chasidus. And there was a person over there, a person of some note, and actually it wasn't Rabbi Yisrael Nevler. It was another chassid. I don't remember the name of the other chassid. And he would daven. He was not a Lubavitcher, and he would daven, but he would daven the Lubavitcher minyan. Maybe that was the only minyan in the area. And when someone would, when the chassid would chazer the Maimer Chasidus every single week, so he would be off on the side and he would pull out a Gemara, Shulchan Aruch, whatever it was, and he would learn. So one day, someone went to him and asked him, "Why don't you? Everyone's sitting and listening to Maimer Chasidus. Why don't you join?" He said, I've heard it all already. I know it. He said, it's all the same thing anyways. Atzilus, Bri, Yitzira, Asiya, Chachma, Bina, Keser, Chud Ilai, Chud Tata. He said in Yiddish, Amol Mefadreit Azay, Amol Mefadreit Azay. Sometimes you say it in this order, sometimes say it in the other order. But I've heard it all. So there's this elderly chassid, Rabbi Yisrael Nevler, he was the one who responded. He said, I have two answers for you. He says, number one, he said, by the Goyim, all Yidden are Abrasha. Abrasha, that's like a nickname for Avram. So when a Goy looks, every single Yid is Abrasha. In other words, I guess that was a popular name. A Goy can't tell the difference between one Yid and another. You're missing the power to be able to distinguish between in subtleties. A Goy sees someone with a hat and with a beard, it's all the same. That's number one. And number two, he said, what else is there to talk about? He says that we're talking only about Atzilus, Bri, Yitzira, Chachma, Bina. He says, what else is there to talk about? And that, the second answer to me was, always took me. I heard this story several times from Reb Mendel. What else is there to talk about? A person who lives in the world of the spirit and the world of Ruchnius. So this is the reality. The reason why these ideas that we're talking about, they become irrelevant when they're not part of our reality. And actually, the whole point of Chassidus is that this should become our reality. And this becomes also somewhat our connection to Hashem. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that. The question you can ask really is, why do we need all of this? We know, we talked about this many times, that Hashem created the world because He wants a dira b'tachtonim. Hashem created the world because He wants to have this world. Olam Haza is what matters. This is where what counts is. And in Emergence Hashem, we're sitting, we're working, we're learning Torah, we're doing mitzvahs. Mashiach is going to come, and then there'll be Tchias HaMesim. There'll be a revelation of the Gili Olakus, revelation of Hashem here in this world. And everything else that was created, all the other spiritual worlds, what is their purpose? So you learn Chassidus and Kabbalah, you find out that there's a whole system that Hashem put into place. It's not that Hashem just said abracadabra, boom, and Olam Haza appeared, but rather there's worlds upon worlds, an infinite amount of worlds and spiritual energies that are condensed and contracted until finally, as a result of all of this, what you want to call this assembly line, this process, the spiritual process, our world emerges. Because Hashem is absolutely infinite. So how does this world emerge from the infinite? And the answer is through the many simsumim and through the many worlds. But you can argue that's not a very satisfactory answer. You can argue that if Hashem wanted to create this world, He could have said abracadabra and the world would have come into existence. Hashem's a kel yachol. Hashem's omnipotent. He can do whatever He wants. So if the kavana, if the point is only this world, why is it necessary? Why do we need all the baggage?
Why do you need all the tzimtzum?
Why do we need all the worlds and all these other spiritual realities? Hashem could have just said, like when He said Yehi Oyer and Yehi Rekiah, Yehi Olam, let there be a world, boom, and there's nothing. Why do we need all of that? And one of the answers is that had Hashem created the world out of nothing in that fashion, no higher worlds, no process, Hashem says, let there be a table. And a table appears. Because as we know, that's not the way it works. As we know, the table is sourced in the higher worlds, right? But let's say there were no higher worlds. Hashem just says, let there be a table. If that were to be the case, there would be an absolute remove between the table and Hashem.
How's that?
There is no correlation. There is no connection. There is no cause and effect. There is Hashem, the infinite Hashem. And then there is the table, which Hashem said, you exist, and you should exist, and therefore it exists. There is no connection between the two.
There is a cause and effect.
That Hashem is the creator, but there is nothing, there's no in between. And it's not only that, then the table is simply the result of Hashem's will that it should be. But it itself didn't emanate within Hashem. It doesn't come from anywhere. It doesn't come from the energy. It is Hashem. So just like a creator, when you create something, there is that remove between you and that which you created. Hashem wants that we should look at a table and actually be able to see, not with the physical eyes, but if you learn enough Chassidus and you understand the process of how it came into existence, you look at the table and you see Hashem. What does that mean, you see Hashem? You actually can work in reverse and work backwards and upwards through the Seder Yishnalshalos, and everything in the world is an expression of Hashem. Not only an expression of Hashem's power and His ability to create, but it's actually an expression of the Eir Ein Sof. The Eir Ein Sof as it condenses, and if you understand the process to a certain extent, you've taken away that absolute canyon, the chasm, is that how you pronounce the word? Chasm. That separate chasm. The chasm that separates between this world and Hashem, because actually we're linked all the way up. You can draw, even on paper, you can say, before the world was created, there was Hashem, and then there was the Eir Ein Sof, and then what happens is a Tzimtzum Addition, and then you have the worlds which are higher than Atzilus, and then you have Atzilus, and then you have the process as it goes down through the spheres, and you can actually figure out and see the connection between here and over there. So ultimately, when we're learning Chassidus and we're learning the dynamic and the formula by which this world was created, what we're doing is we're connecting the world to Hashem. And we're able to look at the world with very different eyes. And when you look at the world, you realize everything in the world, this is only a dogma for the way it is above. Remember, we spoke last week, Mashal HaMelech Basar V'Dam. You look at a king and you say, I look at a king, I can have an understanding in Hashem's Malchus. Why? Because the king wasn't just created, the king is a result of the process. Everything we look at in the world now becomes a mashal for the higher worlds. Why? Because there is that actual connection between everything in the world and the higher worlds working its way up, all the way up until Hashem himself. So learning this process that we are going to be learning more about today and learning over the next weeks is actually very helpful in terms of getting rid of the detachment between world and Hashem. And there's another important point which we'll have a better understanding of by the time we finish this letter, which is, we know something that we've discussed many times. There's this whole huge system, this whole process by which the energy comes down from Hashem and enters this world. And before it enters the world, it goes through huge processes in many other worlds. What causes that flow of energy? So we are on the receiving end. We are on the bottom. And we are literally, it's called Olam Haza HaTachton, this lowest world. There is no world lower than us. So in a way you can argue, we're the ultimate receivers. Every other world receives energy and then transmits it further on. There's nowhere further to transmit it. We're on the bottom. We're the bowl that collects everything that comes. So that might make us feel inferior. But actually, as we've discussed many times, we're the ones that set all of the energy into motion. The fact that there's energy in the world of Atzilus is because of our learning Torah and our doing mitzvahs. The whole Seder Ishtalshelus depends upon our Avodah down here. And not only in general, but also in particular. Every mitzvah that we do evokes unleashes a different type of energy above. Hashem Tzilcha, the Baal Shem Tov says, as we know, that Hashem Tzilcha, so literally Hashem Tzilcha means Hashem is your shade. But the Baal Shem Tov says Hashem Tzilcha means Hashem is your shadow. Just like in a shadow, you lift up your right hand, the shadow lifts up its right hand. You lift up your left hand, the shadow lifts up its left hand. The same thing is Hashem mimics our behavior. The type of behaviors that we engage in and what we do causes corresponding movements and flows of energy above. The more we learn, therefore, about what goes on above, and then, as will happen when we finish this paper, we are going to figure out how actually everything that we're talking about over here is stimulated by our avodah. It gives us a much deeper appreciation for an understanding of what we're doing, what we're accomplishing. It's not just that we're doing a mitzvah, we have an understanding of the dynamics of above, and therefore we understand what we're achieving and what we're affecting when we do a mitzvah. So there are many different reasons why it's important to learn what's going on above. To summarize what we just said just now, number one, if this is your reality, I know my son, he loves to watch videos. Every other day, he's like, he'll be like, I'm trying to think of examples. How does this happen? How do they make this? How do they make canned corn? How is milk pasteurized? And he's actually a genius. He knows a lot of things. He has this incredible curiosity. He wants to know how things happen. So on a very simple level, there's a curiosity which all of us have to one degree or another to know how things work. So number one is, this teaches us how things work. If this is our reality, if the reality is that the Eibishter creates the world, we want to know what are the dynamics that come into play. That's number one. Number two, by learning this, we eliminate or lessen the divide between Hashem and creation. And number three, it gives us a greater chayis in our Torah mitzvahs, because we now really understand what we're accomplishing when we learn some Torah and when we do mitzvahs. Okay, so that's just a general introduction to what we're talking about. Let's move back to the concept of Kibika Hashem Tzurei Lamim. If you remember, so last week we explained as follows. We know that everything begins with Chachma. Everything begins with Chachma, which is the original Eir Ein Sof, the original light of Hashem, which is higher than Havana Vasaga, higher than comprehension, higher than understanding. Gan Eden is the world of Bina, is the world of understanding. That's where that light of the light of Chachma is somewhat processed to a certain degree. And that's what the Neshamas in Gan Eden do. They understand Hashem. And that's why Biyud Nivra Olam Haba, what does it mean? Olam Haba is created with the Yud, because in Olam Haba is the world of Bina. And because what are they doing in the world of Bina? They're processing the Chachma of Hashem. They're benefiting and they're basking in the rays of the Chachma of Hashem and trying to grasp some of it. So that means that what is the foundation of Olam Haba? Where does Olam Haba emerge from? From Chachma. And then the Alter Rebbe moved on. This is about where we ended last week, which is that the pasuk says, Hashem bechachma yasad aretz. That Chachma also is the foundation of aretz, of the earth. And the earth is known as the hay. The earth is the last level of Hashem's name, the lower hay, which is associated with Malchus and Dibur, which tells us that there's some sort of special connection between Chachma and Malchus, which is hard to understand, because we know that there's a whole process. It begins with the awareness, which is Chachma, and then it's processed in the Bina, and then it becomes part of the emotions, and only after that does it come to speech. We don't move straight from the subconscious to speech, because something which is subconscious, which you have not yet processed, will not come out in any intelligible way which can be articulated normally. So what does it mean, in the words of the Zohar, Abba Yosad Brata, that the daughter, which is Dibur, which is Malchus, finds its source in Chachma? So to understand this, let's do a little exercise over here. Okay, everyone, repeat after me. You ready?
After me.
Ba va ma pa.
Ba va ma pa.
Okay. You just said the four letters of Beis, Vav, Mem, and Pei. What's unique about these four letters, we know that they're what's called the Hei Moitzois Hapeh, which means that there are 5 ways in which letters, there are 5 different types of letters. These 4 letters, Beis, Vav, Mem, and Pei, all of them require the lips. Some letters come straight from the throat, some letters are by way of the palate, some letters are through the teeth, some with the lips, some with the tongue. These 4 letters are with the lips. You all just said them.
In Hebrew it's called Otiyot Geroniyot.
Now,
That's the one?
no, that's Achet. That's Aleph Ches Hey Ayin.
Oh, the others.
Yeah. Now, question for you. You just all said these letters. What is the difference between, and I want you to listen quietly, what is the difference between a Beis, a Vav, a Mem, and a Pei? How did you say, can you figure out, without saying it, don't move your lips, okay? How did you say the Beis, how did you say the Vav, the Mem, and the Pei? What was the different mechanism? You use your lips for all 4 of them.
That's correct.
So what made one a Beis, one a Vav, one a Mem, and one a Pei?
The mapik,
What does the Mapik mean?
the dot inside the letter.
No, I'm asking in a very physical way. What makes one and one other?
Yeah.
Let's do another exercise. Okay, everyone, close your mouths.
That's gumaf.
Close your mouths now. Stay that way. No, kidding. Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. The letter Lamed. I want you to think in your mind how it is said. And I want you to be, without saying anything, without moving your lips, even though you're wearing a mask, don't cheat over here, okay? I want you to think, can you in your mind figure out how to say a letter Lamed? What movements of the mouth are necessary in order to say a letter Lamed?
Just the beginning or the whole?
No, the lip. Yeah.
It's 2 movements.
In your mind, you were able to figure that out? Without moving your mouth, you were able to figure out how to say a letter Lamed? You weren't able to. Were you able to? No.
You have to do it to be able to.
So when you do it, la mid, even then, la mid. Okay, in truth, it's not the mem, just the la mid, the la. Okay. That's a palate. That's a palate letter, right? Tongue in the palate.
Tongue in the palate.
Tongue in the palate.
Tongue going down away from the palate.
So how strange is it? How many times a day do you think it is that you say the letter lamed? That you say make a L sound, a lamed sound? Would it be safe to say thousands of times a day? Definitely hundreds of times a day? And you have no idea how you do it. Think about how strange that is. You say a beis, a vav, a mem, and a pei. You're doing it all the time. You have no idea how you do it. This is something which is...
It's automatic.
It's strange. Where does this automaticness come from? You know, for example, let's say you wanted to learn how to play the piano. So how does that happen? You learn the keys, you learn how to do it, and you play the song. But when you speak, it's not that way. No one ever taught you how to move your lips. No one ever taught you how to move your tongue, your palate. You never taught. It works the other way around. You want to speak, and your mouth moves. To the point that you have no idea even how it happens. Is there any other example in life where we're doing things, and you don't know how you do it? Any other example you can think of?
Thinking.
Walking.
I'm talking about a physical action.
Walking.
So if you're sitting over here, you would have to stand up. If I were to tell me, describe me how you walk, you would say 1 second, stand up, and you would think about it, how you did it, and then you'd sit down and you describe it to me?
It's automatic.
No. It's not, no. I'm asking something different. Is there anything which you do automatically, and you have no idea how you do it? You can't explain it. Now, you have to understand something else, which is that once you learn how to play piano very, very well, then there's something called muscle memory.
Second nature.
Right? Second nature, and you're not going to be thinking which keys. But at the same time, if you go and ask that person and say, okay, so how do you play the song? He's not going to be, I don't know, muscle memory. No, that person is going to know how he did it. Speaking, it doesn't work that way. We don't know how we do it. It's the strangest thing. Let's learn about this inside, and let's see how it connects to the idea of Abba Yosad Brata. We are starting on page Kuf Zayin, which is opposite of page 212.
How many lines?
We'll start again for it says V'nikra Abba Yosad Brata,
When's that located?
which is around, let's say, 8 lines on the top. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 lines on the top. V'nikra Abba Yosad Brata.
Translate.
So even though that the father is the foundation of the daughter, which means that Dibur emerges from Chachma. Abba, the father, is Chachma. Brata, the daughter, is Dibur. Malchus, which is Dibur. And the daughter emerges from the father. So even though that up until now in this letter, what did we say? We said that Olam Haba Nivra Biyud, right? Which means that Bina emerges from Chachma, which that makes sense, by the way, because that's true in our experience. We process the awarenesses. Yeah. Suddenly we're saying over here there's some sort of connection also between the Abba, the Chachma, the subconscious, and Dibur. Pirush meaning Kihine his Havus Oisiyas HaDibur, the creation of the Oisiyas HaDibur. The words, the letters that we speak. Hayoitzeis Mehei Moitzois Hapeh. That these emerge from the 5 different ways that the mouth can express itself. Einon davar muskel, v'lei mutva beteva meitzois halalu, loitzi mifta oisius, aidei hevel vakel hamaka behen al pi haterech hateva v'lei al pi derech hasechel. The Alter Rebbe says, the emergence of the letters, when we say letters, it's not natural to the human being. A cow, for example, right? It says moo, or it doesn't really say moo. The official word is it lows. The dog barks, right? The cat says meow. These are all natural to it. That's its natural mode of expression. We can't say that by the human being, the natural thing is that we speak words. It's not teva, it's not nature. Unlike by animals, that there's a certain natural sound that they give off. By us also, you can say there's a natural sound. The natural sound is a grunt. Right? But the letters that we put together, it's not a result of our nature. It's also not a result of our seichel. Because again, our mouths are not being operated by any conscious seichel whatsoever. We are not consciously moving our lips in any particular form. So let's read this again inside. Yeah. Einan davar muskul. It's not something which is dictated by logic. It's not seichel. It doesn't come through the normal process of seichel, whereby we figure out how to move our lips or to move the different oral organs in order to be able to articulate certain letters. It's not part of the nature. These mitzois, these different sorts of emergences of letters, to articulate these particular letters, through the breath and the voice that makabehem, that strikes them. In other words, what you do is you're having the breath and the sound that's emerging from you strikes the tongues and the lips. Al pi derech hatava, this is not nature. V'lei al pi derech haseichel, it's not seichel. Okay, going for example, hasvasayim al derech mashal. Let's talk about the lips. She'ez yiz beis vav mem pei yetzis mehen. Those are the four letters that emerge from the lips, right? There are no other letters that way. Like, do it ba, va also. You need the bottom lip for the va, ma, and pa, right? These are the four letters that use the lips. No other letters, right? Okay. Ve'ein hatava v'lo yaseichel nois niyatzias mifta arba chalki shnui b'tuy yoisis ela al pi shinui tenuis hasvasayim. It's not natural, and it's not a product of the seichel that these four different types of letters come out al pi shinui tenuas hasvasayim, based on the different ways that the lips move. Shem mishnoi anois, that the lips move behevel echad ve'koil echad apegea behen b'shava. After all, it's one sound and one breath that hits them, and there is no logic in behind why we're not thinking about how, to move the lips in this way in order to have this sound come out. Va'adarabba, and here's the very important point. Va'adarabba, it's the contrary. Shinui atnui shebesvasayim, the fact that your lips move in different ways in order to produce the different sounds. That's because the ratzon in your nefesh, you have the ratzon levata besfasayim kirtsoina. You when you desire to express lemar ois beis evav emem pei, when you want to say a beis or a vav or mem or a pei, so automatically your lips move in the way which will cause that letter to be said. It's not the opposite. That it should be the desire of the soul to move the lips in certain ways. As they move now, when saying these four letters. Once again, going back to the point, when you want to play the piano, your mind, it's not as if your mind says, oh, I want to play a song, and unconsciously your hands just move, boom, boom, boom. No. Your mind tells your hands, move along the keys in this way, and then the song emerges. Again, I'm not talking about the 1,000th time that you did it when you already used it, but at a very simple level, if you want to play a song, it's not like, okay, I want to play a song, and then without even realizing, your hands just lift up, and they start, swimming along it doesn't work that way. No. It works the other way around. You have to take your hands and figure out the keys and move it, and then the song emerges. When you speak, it's the opposite way. You want to speak, and automatically, your mouth moves. It's a totally different process. And as we see this explicitly, this is something which is obvious. The that the soul does not intend or know at all to how to be mekaven bibitui shine tnus hasvasayim, the different movements of the lips. Again, as we mentioned before, we have no idea how our lips move unless you happen to be a speech pathologist. And by the way, that's taka sometimes in an abnormal case. So you have certain people who, for whatever reason, I don't know what the spiritual reason is, but they want to say a certain word and it's not coming out. They want to be able to pronounce a certain letter and they can't. They have a lisp. They want to say a lamed and it comes out a wamid, right? So in such an instance, you have to have a speech pathologist come along and show exactly how to move the lips. But in 99% of people, that's not the case at all. We have no idea how it works. We want to say the word and it comes out. And even more you see this, bibitui hanakudis. When you want to say nakudis, once again, without looking at anything. What's the routine without moving your lips? What's the routine? A kamatz and a patach. In the back you're cheating, by the way. I saw that. Yeah. You moved your lips. What's in yeah, I saw.
I'm not from Neville.
You're not from Neville. What's in a kamatz and a kamatz and a patach? How do you move? It's the same letter, a base, right? How would you say ba versus ba? The answer is actually, interestingly, it's in the meaning of the word kamatz means to close and patach means to open. So ba, your mouth is it's not closed completely, but ba, for a you have to open your mouth more than for. But again, we're doing this all the time and you have no idea. You have no idea that if you want to say a patach, your mouth has to be more open. If you want to say a kamatz, your mouth has to be more closed. But it's because there is no consciousness of this. It is when your neshama wants to say a letter with the nekuda of kamatz, as I then memela automatically nikmotzim hasvasayim, the lips close relatively. Or bepatach, when someone wants to say a patach, niftachim hasvasayim, the lips open. It's not that you want to close your mouth or to open it klal or klal. It's contrary. You know what you want to say, and the lips move unconsciously. And there's no reason to elaborate. B'davar hapashat umuvan umuskal lakol maskil. There's no need to elaborate on something which is a simple thing and it's understood to anyone who understands what's going on. That the enunciation of the letters and the nekudis, it does not emerge from the conscious seichel of a person. Ela meseichel hanelam, it comes from the subconscious. V'kadmus haseichel, that which precedes the seichel. Shebenefesh, in the nefesh, hamedaberes, in the soul of the person who speaks. And interestingly, that's why the Alter Rebbe says, therefore, ein hatinik yachal ladaber. That's why a small child can't understand. Af shemevan hakoil, even though the child understands everything. I'll come back to the slide in a few minutes. This is really the idea of Abba Yasad Brata. Alter Rebbe is saying, when you speak, there are two things that are going on every time that you're speaking. There's the ideas that you're saying, the ideas that you're expressing, and then there is the delivery system for those ideas. The delivery system are the words and the letters that you use. The ideas that you use, the ideas that you're expressing, they went through a very sequential process within your nefesh, within your psyche, starting with the subconscious, starting with your awarenesses. That's your chachma, and then from there they moved on to your bina, where you processed the ideas. From there they moved on to your midas, and you gained some sort of personal attachment or relationship or feelings about those ideas. And then finally, dibur, you say them. But then there's the delivery system, the letters that are used, the words that you use, and these letters have a direct relationship with the subconscious, with the chachma, which is why there are, explained in Chassidus, there are oisius in the nefesh, in chachma, and the fact that your mouth moves and expresses these words without the conscious seichel of yours dictating how, what, when, and where, tells you it comes from an even higher level. It comes from chachma, it comes from the subconscious. So when you're speaking, the ideas reflect the conscious you, the words that you use,
Subconscious.
and the articulation of the words are the subconscious you. Yes,
So why a baby that can't speak?
we're going to get there in a
If that
second.
came from the Chachma,
We'll get there.
subconsciously,
We'll get there in a second.
we're out of this. Yeah.
Let's talk about it also in a deeper way. If me and you both know the same thing, and we both decide to share it, are we going to use the same words?
No.
Even though we know the exact same thing. I'm not talking about if I understand it a little better and you understand it a little worse. We both have a 100% equal understanding of a topic, and we're both going to say the same thing. But even if we both say the exact same thing,
Only the same words.
we won't use the same words. I'm not talking about that I might give a muscle which you don't give, because that's already adding something. Even if me and you were to express the exact same thing, we wouldn't use the same words. Even in simple interactions in life. The good morning that you give to someone. When you are sitting by the table and you tell someone, pass the salt. The words that you will use are not the words that someone else is going to use. We have this idea that there is the idea itself that you're trying to convey, and then there is the delivery system which you use to convey it. The delivery system is made up of the words that you used, which are more spiritual, but also the physical movements, the physical articulation of those words. In other words, the spiritual words and the physical words, which in Mirz Hashem in the later lessons we're going to talk more about the difference between the two, the spiritual words and the physical words. But we all understand there's the spiritual words are your choice of words, the physical words are the articulation of the words, and both of those there is a, I don't know, I don't want to call it an override. It's not an override, but it's like when you have a system and when there's like another like a shortcut. You know what I'm talking about? There's a better word for it.
Branch?
No, and yeah, there's a long way of going, and then sometimes there's like a shortcut. There's a shortcut between. No, there's a shortcut between the subconscious and the dibur. The ideas that the dibur expressed went from chachma to bina to midas until finally you're able to express them. But the method used to express them, the words that you use, and the articulation of the letters, those are all rooted straight into chachma. Bypass, yes. There's a bypass. Very good.
Goes all the way down to the bottom.
There you go. There's a bypass from chachma to dibur, and that's why we say Abba Yasad Brata, and that's why you can have a little child, and the difference between the child who speaks and the child who doesn't speak, the child who's the quick speaker, the child who's not, is not necessarily a difference in intelligence. We all know that. You can have sometimes a more intelligent child, and they're delayed in their speech, and sometimes you have a child who's of average intelligence, and they get to speak earlier. And by the way, even before both of those children speak, there still are ideas that are going on in the child, and the child can understand. The child understands what you're saying to them very often, but they can't speak. And that is, once we understand that speaking is rooted in some place higher than the conscious self, until that link has been made between the subconscious and the dibur, then a person can't speak. Even though the person can be very smart, and even though all the processes can be working, and the person can understand what's going on, but there is missing that link.
How is that link acquired?
Sorry?
How is the link acquired? By an infant.
I don't know. Well, actually,
You can't teach it.
Interestingly,
How does it happen?
this is actually somewhat connected to Pesach. The Chazal tell us, "Ein hatina gidea likres Abba achayitim tam dogon." That it has to do with eating wheat. Dogon, yeah. And interesting is that the word chita
Sweet.
is the gematria of 22, which is the 22 letters of the Aleph base. You don't know how to speak until you have chita. And chita in Kabbalah is always a reference to chachma. There's a lot going on over here. There are certain which is it's connected to Pesach because it has to do with eating matzah, without getting into that right now. But with matzah, we're trying to connect taka to the chachma because it's chita. Exactly the process of how a child makes that connection, I don't know. Obviously, it's somewhat of a natural one. But at the end of the day, there's the understanding that there's two different tracks within the human being. There is the normal process and track, which is Chachma, Bina, Midas, Malchus, which is the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, and the Hey. And then there's another process which goes straight from the Yud, the top Yud, to the bottom Hey.
Express.
Right. So therefore, Chachma is connected to Bina. And that's why in V'nahar Yetze Me'edan L'Hashkes Sagan, as we said last time, Eden is Chachma. And the flow that goes out of Eden irrigates and gives to drink the Gan, which is Bina, right? So that's one, Chachma, Bina. And then there's another way, which is Abba Yasad Brata. There's also that flow which goes directly from the subconscious, from the Chachma, straight to the delivery system of that information. Again, the information follows one way, the delivery system comes straight from the subconscious, which is why we can't really make sense of it. And I don't know why I use some words and you use other words. It's a very personal thing, the words that we use, and it's very connected to our subconscious. I'm sure you know that today, especially with technology, they're able to identify word patterns that people use. And it's like a fingerprint. That's how unique it is. You know, I don't know if you remember, many years ago there was this book that was printed. This was in the beginning of this computer technology. There's a book that was printed. I forgot the name. It was about President Clinton. And it was written anonymously. And it was published. And it was a big hit. You know what I'm talking about? I think it was called Primary Colors, if I remember correctly, but don't hold me to that. And they put it through a computer, and they found out who it was. Why? Because this person was a writer. I think he had written for the New York Times. So they found other people. In other words, they wanted to know who has the same types of mannerisms and word usages, and they were able to pinpoint the person that he admitted, that he wrote the book, because the words that you use are rooted in your subconscious. That's why me and you can have the same ideas. But the words that I use will express me, and the words that you use will express you, because it's not just about the idea, it's also about the subconscious, which expresses itself in the words that you use, and also in the actual articulation of the words, and that is Abba Yasad Brata, and that means the special connection between Chachma and to Malchus. Where does that leave us? I don't know. We have to figure that out, because let's summarize where we are right now. Up until now, we talked about the Yud. The Yud is Chachma. One flow from Yud comes into Olam Haba and to Bina, that we've established. And we also know that there's a separate connection between Chachma and Malchus. What do we do with that information? The connection between Chachma and Malchus, we don't know yet. That we have to work on in Mir Tashem in future weeks. And in the time we have remaining today, let's do a little connection to the current times, as we usually do. And there's an incredible Hashgacha Pratis connecting what we're talking about with the time, specifically the date today. Today is Chav Zayin Adar. 29 years ago today, Chav Zayin Adar, Tavshin Nun Beis, the Rebbe had a stroke. The Rebbe was at the oil. It was on Monday, and the Rebbe was at the oil, and the Rebbe had a stroke. And from first 27 years ago today, on the same date, the Rebbe had a second stroke. Both of the Rebbe's strokes were on Chav Zayin Adar.
Wow.
Yeah, sometimes you see, definitely not a coincidence. 2 years apart, and one of the biggest impacts that the stroke had on the Rebbe was that it took away from the Rebbe his koyach hadibur. The Rebbe didn't speak anymore after that.
Still was Zach. Chav
Zayin. And that obviously connects to what we're talking about. We're giving a whole share about Dibur on the day when the Dibur seemingly stopped. The Dibur seemingly stopped. Interestingly, a few weeks before then, around 6 weeks before then, on Gimel Shvat, the Rebbe said a Sikha, and the Rebbe spoke about the fact that his father-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe, something that we've spoken about in the past, that his speech was impacted. He was not able to speak clearly.
He also had a stroke.
And the Rebbe was somewhat emotional as the Rebbe was speaking, and the Rebbe said that one of the doctors who visited the Frierdiker Rebbe, this is what the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said this story on Gimel Shvat Tavshin Nun Beis. The Rebbe said that one of the doctors who visited the Frierdiker Rebbe told him that how is it that of all the faculties of yours, the one that has been impacted and harmed is your ability to speak. When that is the one faculty and quality that is so necessary in order to be a leader, in order to inspire people and to say Torah and to give people advice and to give brachas, and that's the one area which you've been impacted. It's not the first time that the Rebbe said this episode was the Frierdiker Rebbe, and other times the Rebbe kind of gave explanations. That Moshe Rabbeinu also, his dibur was impacted, it was a kvad peh. But on this occasion, the Rebbe simply said, the Rebbe didn't answer the question. The Rebbe said, like, the answer to that question is, V'arin achicha yiyeh neviecha. Right, when Moshe told Hashem, what do I do when I'm kvad peh? And Hashem responded, Aaron achicha yiyeh neviecha. Okay, Aaron will speak on your behalf. And the Rebbe says, it's our job to speak on the behalf of the Frierdiker Rebbe. We became his mouthpiece. We became, and this was 6 weeks before Chav Zayin Adar. And then when Chav Zayin Adar came, and the Rebbe lost his faculty for speech, suddenly we saw the Rebbe was giving us a little of a message in advance that that now we become the spokesman, right? The ones who carry the Rebbe's words and the Rebbe's Torah further. V'arin achicha yiyeh neviecha.
Neviecha or yel chalepe?
Pasuk says v'arin achicha yiyeh neviecha. There's another pasuk. Hu yiyeh lecha. So, what is the significance of losing speech, especially based on what we're talking about? Obviously, losing speech means some sort of loss of connection. Side with the chachma. In other words, and speech is the idea of revelation to others. When that which is going inside you, and the conscious you and the subconscious you cannot be revealed to others, as we see how important dibur is, because it expresses what's going on inside you. And ever since that day, ever since the Chav Zayin Adar, this is 29 years ago today, so our job as Hasidim, to a certain extent, transitioned from being listeners to being speakers. So up until that point, we were sitting and listening to the Farbrengens and to the Sichos and absorbing and enjoying. And the Rebbe made it very clear the weeks beforehand that now our job has become v'ar nechicha yiyeh neviecha. Yeah, we still learn, we still listen. Obviously, there's so much of the Torah there is, but our job is to give over. And interestingly, this week is Shabbos Parshas Vayakel Pekudeh. One of the things that the Rebbe, as they say in Yiddish, the Rebbe kocht sich in them. A word which is difficult to translate into English. The Rebbe cooked in it. Yeah. The Rebbe was passionate about was names. Names.
People, right?
But people also, yeah.
And what else?
But without Parshas. Parshas, the name of a Parsha.
Oh.
To the Rebbe, the name of a Parsha is a huge thing. Based on what we learn in Shaykh V'Amunah, that the name of anything is the energy, the divine energy within anything is expressed in the letters of the name. So the name of everything is very, very essential and indicative of what that thing really is. You want to know what something is? Study the name. I don't, for sure, definitely in the later years, it's impossible that there should have been a Farbrengen in Shabbos where the Rebbe doesn't talk about the name of the Parsha. Maybe I'm exaggerating slightly, maybe it happened once in a while, but it was something which was always a very focal thing by the Rebbe. What's interesting is about the names, when you have a double Parsha, so a Parsha, that means you have a Parsha that has two names. That's really what it is. It's not really two Parshas, we have one Parsha. With two names, a double name. It's also interesting that many of these double names have exact opposite meanings of each other. Like, one of the famous ones is Nitzavim Vayelach, stand still. Nitzavim means standing, and Vayelach means going, right. And the others also. And then, in this week's Parsha is also, you have two different names to this week's Parsha, Vayakel Pekudeh, which are also exact opposites of each other. Talk about a juxtaposition of two opposites. Vayakel means the idea of making a call. Congregation. A call, an assembly, a congregation, the idea is it's something where the sum is greater than the parts. When you become part of a call, it's about the call, it's about the identity. 10 Yidden come together, you make a minyan. The minyan is larger than the individual components. It's not as if, until we had 10 Yidden, so then we were 90% there. So you could say 90% of Kaddish. And once you have 10th, so now no. When you have 9 people, you have nothing. And once you have the kohol, though everyone transforms and becomes part of this larger congregation, it's the idea of something greater than the individual. Pikudei means to count. Counting means that every individual is counted. So really, Vayakel and Pikudei have 2 very different meanings from each other. In terms of what this means to us, the Rebbe talks about it also in terms of what it means with the Mishkan, because obviously the Parsha talks about the Mishkan. Is that a Yid, the first thing by a Yid is Vayakel. The first thing a Yid has to know is my identity as a Yid. That's what makes me important, is that I'm a Yid. That I'm part of Kahal Adas Yisrael. That's the first thing. The first thing a Yid is, you put aside your own perceived importance and your own perceived talents and whatever it is, and you realize, I'm a Yid, that's the most important thing. And you mevatel yourself. You mevatel yourself to that which is greater than you. You mevatel yourself to the larger cause, and you become part of Kahal Adas Yisrael. Once you do that, step number 1 is the step of bittul. Bittul to the larger ideal. Once you do that, then you have pikudei. Then you gain also individual importance. It's not only that you're important because you're a Yid, you're individually important. The example that Rebbe gives is of the Mishkan. If you were to build a menorah with all the exact specifications, would it have the kedusha of the menorah? No.
Has to be part of the sum total.
Oh, so you have to bring it into the Mishkan, and it has to be part of the Mishkan. Once it's part of the Mishkan, when you look at it, you say, oh, it's holy because it's part of the Mishkan? Or do you say it also has its unique holiness as a menorah? It's not. The menorah is different than the shulchan, which is different than the mizbeach, which is different than the aron, which is different than the krashim. The Mishkan was made up of many different components, which on their own were nothing. But once they're part of the Mishkan, their value isn't only that they're part of the Mishkan, they also have individual value.
Once they're part of it.
I'll give you an example.
Standalone is not
Exactly. Once you're a Yid, you gain individual value.
But
For example, take tzitzis, right? Okay, so there are 4 strings to the tzitzis.
Yeah.
What if you have only 1 string? It's garnished, right? Good. Put together the tzitzis, now as kedusha. Is there any individual value to each string?
Yes.
No.
No. When you put it together.
So then the value is that they're tzitzis. But would you say the first thread is unique in this way? The second thread, no.
It's a standalone.
They're all holy, but what is their kedusha? Their kedusha is that they're part of the tzitzis. In the Mishkan, it was different. Once they became part of the Mishkan, they each attained their own kedusha. Also, Vayakel, once you become part of the Vayakel, Pikudei, and the same thing is also with Yidden. First we have Vayakel, because with all your talents and all your individuality, if you're not a Yid, then none of that really counts in the larger scheme of things. But once you're a Yid, you also have your individual kedusha. And these are 2 different avodas that we have in our life. The avodah of bittul and the avodah of mitzias. The first avodah that we have is being mevatel ourselves. Being mevatel ourselves to Hashem, and nullifying ourselves to Hashem, being part of Klal Yisrael. And then after the avodah of bittul, after that avodah, then we move on to the next avodah, the avodah of mitzias. Once I am part of Klal Yisrael, and once I am batel, now I need to develop my own individual, unique personality and my unique kedusha also. But that Pikudei always has to follow the Vayakel. Idea understood? 29 years ago, Vayakel and Pikudei was not together. Vayakel and Pikudei was a leap year. Vayakel and Pikudei were separate. Shabbos Parshas Vayakel was Chaf Hei Adar, and the Rebbe spoke. And the Rebbe said something very different than when he usually spoke. The Rebbe says, this year, Vayakel and Pikudei are separate. That means that we don't need Pikudei. That means that Vayakel itself has value in and of itself. And Mashiach can come before Pikudei. We just got to do Vayakel, and we'll Pekudei, after Mashiach comes, we'll do Pekudei. We don't have to wait for Pekudei. Usually, a lot of times, Vayakel and Pekudei are together. But this year, because Vayakel and Pekudei are separate, so that teaches us that we can bring Mashiach with Vayakel itself. And 2 days later, the Rebbe had a stroke and didn't speak again. Parshas Pekudei, there was no Farbringen. What is the significance of this? And obviously, we don't know exactly, we don't know for sure, but there seems to be something very, very huge going on over here. Vayakel Moshe is called Kahal Adas B'nai Yisrael. Who causes the Vayakel is Moshe Rabbeinu. Eila Pekudei, Hamishkan Asher Pukad. Who did the counting? Not Moshe. Al Pi Moshe. Eila Pekudei Hamishkan Mishkan Ha'edus Asher Pukad. Al Pi Moshe. The Mishkan was counted based on the directives that Moshe had given. Vayakel Moshe. Moshe does the Vayakel, and the Pekudei is Al Pi Moshe. And based on what we said, it makes a lot of sense. When you stand in front of Moshe Rabbeinu, you have no individual identity. You're Batel. You're completely Batel. When I stood before the Rebbe by Farbringen, and there were thousands of people over there, there was no, even in an extreme level, you had big Rabbanim over there, and you had Askanim over there, and simple people, and all different types of people, big Talmidei Chachamim. All the same. Everyone sat there like a simple chassid of the Rebbe, listening to the Rebbe says. There was no individuality, there was no uniqueness. There was that feeling of humility and bittul when you stand in front of someone who is truly like a Moshe Rabbeinu, someone so much greater than you, and that causes the Vayakel. What is Vayakel? How do you gather together people and make them in a kol when each one of them sheds their individuality? Vayakel Moshe. You want to have Pekudei? You want everyone to be counted? You want everyone's individual milas? For that, you can't be standing in front of Moshe. You can't shine individually when you're standing in front of Moshe. That's Al Pi Moshe. Using Moshe's directive, you go off to your own house, to your own neighborhood, to your own city, and you utilize your uniquenesses and your strengths and your passions to do what Moshe wants you to do. But when you're standing in front of Moshe, you can only be Batel. That's what you do. And there we were on Shabbos Parshas Vayakel, Tavshin Nun Beis. And the Rebbe is screaming, and the Rebbe is saying, we don't need Pekudei, Vayakel is enough. It's like the Rebbe was trying to fend off what's going to happen. The Rebbe is saying, we can bring Mashiach with the Vayakel. Everyone's standing here, everyone's Batel. The idea that I have to leave, and that the Dibur has to be taken away from me, and that everyone now has to become my spokesman, and everyone has to express me in their unique, individual way, in their Pekudei way. The Rebbe was trying to avoid that. The Rebbe said, let's bring Mashiach right now, and enough with that. But obviously, for whatever reason, that wasn't the plan. We know it wasn't the plan because it didn't happen. That's the most positive way to know. And the answer is that next Shabbos on Pekudei, the Rebbe didn't speak. Because the Pekudei is Al Pi Moshe. Vayakel Moshe, that's one was there. And Pekudei, the Rebbe didn't speak. And instead, on Pekudei, we speak. And we're the Va'ar Nechicha Yeneviecha. So here we're talking in the Tanya, we're talking all about Dibur. And how Dibur calls upon all the different levels of the Nefesh, the conscious levels of the Nefesh, the subconscious levels of the Nefesh. Both of them are channeled through the Dibur. And it is our job here to use the Dibur, each one in our own unique way, in our Pekudei way, to go out and take the messages that the Rebbe spoke about, the idea of every single Yid, the preciousness of every single Yid, the importance that every single Yid should do mitzvahs. And obviously, the grand goal of the Rebbe is getting the world ready and getting everyone ready for Mashiach. It's our job to bring it to its conclusion, to be the Aaron, to speak about it and do it right. And when we do that, we'll take be zeicher to the end of Galus, and to be together once again. Mashiach will lead us to Eretz Yisrael, to be together with the Rebbe once again. Amen. Shabbos, everyone.